Well, welcome everybody to this international event that the Catalan National Assembly has organized in the framework of the Catalan Week, a series of events, as you might know, that stand out the importance of the 1st of October independence referendum, while putting the focus on the Catalan struggle abroad. In today's event, we want to commemorate the important 30th anniversary of the independence and restoration of the Baltic republics of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and the consequent recovery of their democratic institutions after the collapse of the Soviet Union on 1991. A key historical event, as most of you might know, in the 20th century Europe, which shamefully hasn't met much coverage from the international media, neither the Catalan one, we might say. Now, in my opinion, and in the name of the Catalan National Assembly, this is the actual purpose for today's debate. It makes it so important, which is to pay an honest tribute to the brave citizens of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, whom 30 years ago offered an example of civil disobedience, self-determination to restore their national freedom, while challenging a despotic regime that had been illegally occupying their countries for 50 years. Now, let me introduce you the participants with whom we have the pleasure to discuss these historical events today. First off, Mr. Artur Talvik. He's an Estonian politician and former leader of the Estonian Free Party, for which he became a member of the Parliament of Estonia from 2015 to 2018. Welcome, Artur.
Hello.
Also, we have Otto Ozols. He's a writer and journalist from Latvia. He has written many articles regarding the Catalan struggle and was an active participant of the Catalan Way in 2013. And finally, coming from Lithuania, we have Tomas Kavaliauskas,
Hello.
philosopher and associated professor at the Vytautas Magnus University in Kaunas, Lithuania. He's specialized in political philosophy and European identity, with a special focus on the Eastern and Central Europe. Well, thank you very much, all of you, to be here today. Now, I will make a brief not introduction that I already made, but just to talk a bit about the structure that we will follow. We will focus on the first part, about this event, to talk about the historical context in the Baltics 30 years ago that led to culminate with this independence restoration movement. A second part focus on comparing the actual Baltic liberation processes with the current independence movement in Catalonia, trying to find out the contradictions and the similarities that both movements have alike, in the light, of course, of the international community and how, from this perspective, can be approached. And we'll finish with the questions and answers section between the audience and the participants. Now, to those of you who have questions during the debate, I will ask you to please send them through the chat. So at the end of the debate, I can deliver them to the participants. Now, before diving into the specific events that culminated with the independence of the three republics, we can actually say that from the mid-80s to the early 90s, the political context at the time in Europe created a specific momentum or window of opportunity that allowed the three Baltic nations to culminate their national liberation processes. I'm talking about the collapse of the Soviet Union, of course, caused by the severe economic and political crisis, which led to this convenient framework we're discussing today. However, and I guess that's why this first part is interesting to discuss, each country led their liberation processes in a rather unique way. And that's why I like to start discussing with you which was the actual context. Now, we'll start with Mr. Tomas Kavaliauskas. Mr. Tomas, Lithuania was the first of the Baltic states to declare independence, restoration on March 11, 1990, anticipating itself to Latvia and Estonia, which were, therefore, in your opinion, the key circumstances that motivated to happen in that way?
Our independence started, unlike in Latvia and Estonia, 1 year earlier in 1990. So we were the first to claim independence, which was, of course, very risky to do it the first, because you do not know what will follow. So of course, somebody had to do it. So Lithuania tried to break the ice, regardless all the dangers. And of course, the most dangerous thing that happened, it wasn't in 1990, because in 1990, what was the most difficult thing was the economic blockade as a revenge from Moscow, in order to prove that Lithuania will not survive on its own economically. But the most dangerous thing, it was in 1991, right after the New Year, in winter, February the 13th, when the parliament and the TV tower in Vilnius was attacked by the Russian army in order to overthrow the independent government. And Lithuanian people, Lithuanian citizens surrounded the parliament. They guarded it at night, and the armless people without any guns, absolutely classic civil disobedience and civil resistance, throwing your body in front of Russian tanks, Russian Soviet tanks to be precise, was the courage that people showed, that tanks are not as powerful as the crowd of innocent people who have no guns, but have lots of courage. And I see that as a direct connection. Mahatma Gandhi preachings that even though there are more Indians than the Brits, and just by numbers could easily win, but the spiritual, politically spiritual principle must be preserved, that we resist those who use guns, we resist without guns, just using our body and in our independent spirit. So that caused Lithuania only 14 victims. Of course, for the families of the victims, even those 14 are a lot. But in comparison to what happened in Bucharest, or what happened in Georgia, and later in the former Yugoslavia, when independence flavor, independence feelings caused such a rise of nationalism that thousands of people died. And in Lithuania, this nationalism was absolutely healthy thing to resist the Soviet Union communist dictatorship. And today, when we use the word nationalism, it sounds negative because of the new development in nationalism itself and in the crisis of European identity in context of liberal values and ultra nationalistic values. But we have to travel 30 years back in time, and nationalism was healthy at that time. No, not in the former Yugoslavia because of Serbia, but in Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia, I see nationalism at that time as a very healthy thing which prompted independence. And human rights at that time was not the term. We simply understood that if we get independence, we get freedom to religion, we get freedom to our true authentic memory of history about Stalin's deportation of Lithuanian elite. We get freedom to go to church, express our religious feelings for those who are feeling that. And that was our human rights, but that was not in the discourse, that kind of term. We understood that our national flag, our national language as number one, and our dignity to wear national costumes, without the Soviet red flag, any decorations. That was our freedom, and that's where our human rights. And only in the year 2000, we are, because of the joining European Union, then we get absolutely different human rights discourse, which means absolutely different things. It's gay rights and rights for ethnic minorities. Then we get into a completely different picture of what human rights mean. But that's not the meaning in the early 1990s. I would have to say that the end of 1980s, the beginning of 1990s, it wasn't a transition from socialism to capitalism. It was a transition from socialism to wild capitalism, because the early 1990s in Lithuania, just like in Russia itself, it was the collapse of values, and new values in agreement with capitalism had to be developed when greed had to be accepted as a positive value. And the beginning of the 90s, in the case of Lithuania, up till 1996, we were experiencing bank collapses. People were losing their incomes because when a bank collapses, simply somebody steals your money, your incomes, your savings. Lots of broken lives. Jurisprudencia is not working, is not functioning. It's not up to any civilized standards. Legal system is corrupt. And it takes time till Lithuania joins European Union, when legal system, jurisprudencia, becomes as much as possible functioning in a civilized way, that civil society and business dealings become civilized, and corruption is goes down, and then completely different quality of capitalism is experienced. I would say that in the year 2000, while capitalism is gone, there's capitalism with its flaws, with its vices. However, I would say that thanks to many investments into coming from European Union, life has improved. Although society is also socially classified into upper and lower classes, and there's certainly big inequality. But it's not Latin America, it's not Venezuela. I would more or less, I would say it is indeed a success story. Lithuania, together with Latvia and Estonia, became NATO countries. Our priority to become geopolitically secured countries, because the danger of Russia and its military activity in its various practices and the provocations in the Baltic Sea and elsewhere is more and more aggressive during Putin's regime. And I would say that it's politically and economically, more or less, it is success story as much as it is in various academic books and the popular discourse. I would accept this as actually a true thing, with all the challenges, but it could have been something else when we see what has happened to Belarus, what has happened to Moldova, those eastern post-communist countries, East Europe, that are on the side of Russia, that became satellite countries. We saw what happened in 2014 in Ukraine, Maidan revolution, how difficult it was for Ukraine to turn away from Russian geopolitical program to pro-Western European countries. So Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia did all that at the beginning of 1990s. and I would say that it's geopolitical.
Okay, I think we have a connection problem with Thomas, no?
What?
Sorry.
So that would be, I guess, my speech for now.
And maybe I will continue then speaking about what happened in Estonia. Aurel, is it okay?
Yeah, please.
We called our these years, we called them, we called these events all together as a singing revolution. And compared to Latvia and Lithuania, we haven't had any victims, so no dead bodies on the streets and etc. Although Latvia and Lithuania had few, but in Estonia there was 0 victims, and therefore it was really kind of Mahatma Gandhi way to do the revolution without victims and just with singing. So we had very many big singing events, and the parts of the songs were so important. So the songs, the messages in the songs were something very new and very brave and etc. So this singing, the choir singing, has been popular in Estonia all the time, and also in Latvia, and probably a little bit less in Lithuania, but these songs brought the people together and raised nationalistic feelings. And I agree with Thomas that the nationalism, those days nationalism was with the very positive sign, not with the bit negative sign as we speak about nationalism today. I think nationalism in a way is good, and but if the nationalism goes extreme, then it's dangerous. Anyway, we had no victims, and that was very good. Although later somebody said that in every revolution there should be some victims as well to be a real revolution. But I would say maybe Thomas had a very good overview, and this overview fits with all those 3 countries in very many ways. I would probably speak about the part or the role of Iceland, the country, and their Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jon Baldvin Hannibalsson, and his role in the big change. So what happened in Western countries, in Western governments? I really recommend to read, everybody, if you can, several interviews done with Jon Baldvin Hannibalsson, who was the foreign minister those days in Iceland, and what he speaks about and what really happened. So there's one example that the big countries, actually, they were so keen to Gorbachev, and they were afraid that if Gorbachev fails, then all the changes or the glasnost or the reforms in Soviet Union, they stop, and it will collapse, and all the old-fashioned guys will take the power back. So therefore they were very careful dealing with Soviet Union, dealing with with Gorbachev, and they were a bit scared to say directly that Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania must be independent immediately. Many big presidents of big powerful countries those days that let's take it carefully, let's watch what is going on. Maybe it's good for the Baltic states to stay with the new Soviet Union, stay in the be part of it, but be sovereign part of it, so etc. etc. It's remarkable is in 1991 George Bush visited Ukraine, and his speech in Ukraine, where he told to Ukrainian people that don't deal with the selfish and suicidal nationalism, and better be part of the Soviet Union with Gorbachev, etc., etc. So you can understand that the Western countries, they wasn't ready for the quick change what happened, and they were really careful. Compared to this, Iceland and Hannibalsson and their government, their behaving was something totally different, and they were really brave, although their economy was kind of connected to Soviet Union as well. They got oil from Soviet Union, and so even if they were economically connected to Soviet Union, they were not afraid to say things directly, and to be like the first country. Iceland was first country who recognized the independence of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And Iceland was in every step a very important country. I guess Hannibalsson was during the happenings in January in Vilnius. Hannibalsson was there in Vilnius as well. So he was a brave man, visited those countries before the independence already. And as much as I read his interviews, he says that his knowings about Soviet Union and what the Soviet Union really is came from his brother, who was a communist in his young years, and he moved to Soviet Union and actually understood very quickly what the Soviet Union really is. And so he really explained to his brother, who was Jon Hannibalsson, what the Soviet Union is and how to behave with Soviet Union. He was connected to Soviet and Baltic dissidents, and so he really was well informed from the good sources to understand the Soviet really mentality. So the change wasn't really really easy, and only later we understood that actually the Western countries were really careful recognizing the independence of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. But thanks God it happened, and all the changes what also Tomas explained actually happened in Estonia. In the beginning, very wild capitalism, and it's turned more and more civilized or westernized. And Estonian, to speak about Estonia, we were really our economy started to grow really, really fast, probably fastest from all those three countries. But I would say that the reason to this change was that we were really close to Finns. Every Estonian had already Finnish friend, and those Finnish friends came to Estonia to explain and teach how the business making should be, and etc. So they brought in a lot of experience and knowledge. And also invested to Estonia very much. So that was probably the good start for the quick growth of economy. So shortly, this was one angle to explain what happened. But from my perspective, point of view, 1988, I was graduated from the conservatoire, and 1989, my first son was born, and 1990, my first daughter was born. So plus all those big changes in the political changes. So from my personal view, there can be bigger changes in your personal life than during those years, and it was extremely interesting and extremely educating and fascinating also, because from most of the serious events I took part, like I went to I gave my children to grandmother and went to protect the Estonian radio house during this night when the tanks came and etc. And but later I would recommend one film done by my good friend Jim Dusty called Singing Revolution, and in that film the changes have been very well explained, very deeply explained as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Artur. Thank you so much. Let's continue now with Mr. Otto Ozols. Getting to Latvia now. The Independence Declaration, Restoration Declaration, came almost 2 months after Lithuania on May 4th, 1990. In your opinion, which were the events that culminated to happen in that way?
We've been inspired by Estonian and Lithuanian friends. We're learning from Lithuanians' courage and Estonians' smart movements. Actually, before, Lithuanians fighting unarmed people against tanks and army, but in meantime, Estonia did many significant and important government decisions about real economical independence from Soviet Union, and we're learning from our neighbors. Okay, but one step back, why I'm smiling at the end of the Artur speech, I was surprised there were really brave men fighting for freedom and making babies all together in one time. Super. If you're coming back to what Tomas explaining about what's happened in Vilnius 1990, in January of 1990s, actually that was very important for whole world history, because that's changed completely the political map in whole world. Actually, what's happened in Vilnius 1990, the Soviet army and special troops tried to attack television, also parliament. They're thinking they have a plan to attack, and they're starting to occupy this TV station, this central TV, and unarmed people staying against those tanks, against the special police troops from Moscow, and that was yeah, that was from one side inspiring. That's how people being brave, how people are ready to fight for independence. The Russian militaries and Russian Moscow special police troops, they think how brave are those people, how important it is independence and freedom and democracy. They understood. The thing later on, I saw some interviews with Russian Spetsnaz or Russian special police team, head of police team. He said he was demoralized when he attacked Vilnius TV center, when he saw how people hated him, how people are ready to dying and staying for democratic values. He said that the whole team of these special commandos been demoralized. They asking himself, what are we doing here? Why are we fighting those people, those freedom and democracy lovely people? Why we are doing this? And how that's changed the history of the whole world. In 1991, in the same year, in August, in Moscow, where the old communist putsch against the Gorbachev. Boris Yeltsin stand up against army and special police troops. And the Russian people in Moscow, they remember what Lithuanians did. They've been inspired by Lithuanians. And they actually repeating Vilnius on Lithuanian experience. They understood we can stand up against the army and special police movement. And Boris Yeltsin was a good friend of Lithuanians and Estonians at that time. The people, the democratic people in Moscow being inspired by Lithuanian example from one side, from the other side, the Russian special forces, police forces, remembering the bad experience in Vilnius. That's why they're rejecting the idea to attacking the Russian parliament. And after the 3 days, Soviet Union collapsed. And I think without the Lithuanian example, that didn't happen. That's why I really said that this Lithuanian experience was very important for all our history. Artur mentioned over the Hannibal zone. What is interesting, there is a sad similarity with the current situation. What's happened, Mr. Hannibalson, Artur already mentioned that the other countries, democratic countries, Germany, France, also United States, also Denmark, they're saying in international forums when Hannibalsons tried to defend Baltic States freedom fight for democracy, they're saying, shut up, stay calm. Why are you supporting those separatists, nationalists, etc., etc.? They're using the same language, the same cliches, but now European Union using against the Catalan supporters. Why are you supporting those separatists or nationalists, etc., etc., etc.? And they acting similar cowardness, similar double-faced like Europe did in 1990s against the Hannibal zone and the Baltic state. That shows that nothing has really changed, that there is more realpolitik than real fight for democratic values and ideas. And sadly, we're seeing the same in Catalonia, then Europe using the same attitude, the same double speak, Orwellish, and yeah. But there is one more interesting point: similarities with our singing revolution and Catalan. I think the Catalonia right now is in a stage of singing revolution. If you're looking deeply, what's happened in Catalonia when Spanish army, okay, paramilitary troops attacking the peacefully demonstrants, what are they doing? They're singing El Segadors, they're singing Estaca, and the other songs also. The answer is common singing. And that's why I'm thinking Catalonia right now is in the same level. We're going step by step for the independence, our independence movement. That was a long process. We're going step by step, but end of the final, one of the final stages being singing revolution. And what I'm seeing, Catalan, regular Catalan independentistas are on singing revolution stage. And that's telling me Catalonia is in a right way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Otto, Artur, and Tomas. Now, after you all, the three of you exposed your ideas, the historical context, I wanted just to ask you, well, to move the topic towards more the way that these independence restorations were actually achieved. On a previous Congress regarding the unilateral independences that the ANC organized last May, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Slovenia at the time, Dimitri Rupel, said, quote, "If we hadn't implemented the unilateral way, our independence cause would have been lost." Now I want to ask you, do you agree with this statement? I mean, in the Baltic context, was there ever an idea from the independent supporters' point of view to contemplate a negotiation with Moscow in order to, set up and start the negotiation process in order to find a peaceful solution to the conflict? Artur, sure.
Right. To be very honest, there was very different groups in Estonia. Like we had National Front, which was the biggest movement, which was in every Baltic states. We had Eesti Congress, Estonian Congress, which was, they were really starting to speak about independence from very beginning. National Front started to speak about negotiations, and they were on a very soft way. And there was actually kind of a conflict between those two big organizations. And the big win was Marju Lauristin was really involved. He was the member of parliament those days, to get those two organizations together on the night of 20th of August, to bring them together and to put them understand that the declaration what they do this night is the real independence declaration, that nobody will, that both parties are will agree with that. So that was very important. And so we had different point of views. We had very soft point of views that we called self economical Estonia, or something like IME, isemajandav Eesti in Estonian, was one step that Estonia must be economically very kind of independent, and but to stay as a part of Soviet Union. And so different such kind of meanings were the positions were during those days, and finally it was really hard to orientate, and to be very honest, me myself, I wasn't the most radical. I haven't had the most radical position. I was softer. I was somewhere between Eesti Congress and National Front. I thought that maybe if we do too quickly, if we do too radical steps, maybe that brings the violence up and ruins everything and brings the So, but the big win was really to bring those two big forces together and to make them understand that this is the way how to declare real independence on the night of 20th of August, 1991. So, yeah.
Okay, Tomas, Otto, any thoughts about why the unilateral way was the actual one that well, ended up happening in both Lithuania and Latvia, and why not a negotiation was carried on?
I think that Gorbachev was in the position, in a quite uncomfortable global position in the late 80s, because it was evident that the Soviet Union is losing the Cold War battle against the United States. Soviet economy wasn't flourishing at all. Communism, all this propaganda discourses did not work, and Gorbachev decided to become as honest as possible, and he called for Perestroika. And Perestroika was accompanied with glasnost, which would be more or less in English freedom of speech. That was what Gorbachev wanted to offer in order to save the Soviet Union, that supposedly the communists will be able to listen to critique about economic and bureaucratic problems that the Soviet Union republics are experiencing, and being open to problems, being open to critique, the Soviet Union will manage to do Perestroika, fundamental reform of the socialist republics, that the socialist system will be saved. And as soon as Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians heard that there is such a thing as freedom of speech, these countries organized the so-called Perestroika governments that are in favor to do the reformations, but then using the possibility of freedom of speech, what about independence? And Gorbachev came to Vilnius in 1988 or 1990 or 1989 to convince. He gave a big speech in Vilnius to convince Lithuanians to stay in the Soviet Union, which will be more like a federation with reformed economy, with more political rights, but just to stay in the Soviet Union, not to touch Soviet Republic system. But as we know, we did claim independence anyway, but it was a preparation period. Lithuanian, the so-called, it's a term that some our European colleagues and students are not familiar, national communists that flirted with Moscow in a Machiavellian strategic way, that supposedly were communists loyal to Moscow. However, we come from Lithuania to Moscow to convince you that once we get independence, we will collaborate with Moscow, we will continue. So there was a group of influential national communists that knew the game rules in Moscow, and slowly we're preparing, psychologically, we're preparing Moscow politicians to take our independence as easy as possible. And as Artur pointed out very well, and Otto, that in Moscow itself, there were two groups, that those Gorbachevian Perestroika people and those old hardcore communists that were against Gorbachev's ideas. And Yeltsin, another story that finally announced Communist Party illegal, but as we know, it's back in Russia. So a negotiation part did exist, however, in a smart Machiavellian way, pretending being a nationalist communist, knowing what we are doing.
Thank you, Thomas. Otto, would you like to add something to this topic, or shall we move to the next one?
If we're coming back to history, this is one interesting fact. Do you know which country first recognized independence of Russian Federation?
Moldova.
What?
Moldova.
No. Estonia. Estonia was the first country in the whole world who recognized independence of Russian Federation with the President Yeltsin officially. And Russia was the first country in the whole world who recognized independence of Estonia. And this is a very crucial, very important point. Our diplomacy, the Baltic States diplomacy, I would say, the leading person was my favorite foreign Estonian president and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lennart Meri. He was unique personality. He has friends all across in Europe. He speaks in 7 languages fluently. Okay, at least in 4. And Estonians also, the diplomats are working very, very fast. They know how to use this window of opportunity. They know the friends in Europe with whom to speak and how to act, and they acting precisely, immediately, fast and precise. Okay, in August 20, Estonian government had a conversation with Boris Yeltsin in Moscow. Okay, what we deal before, in our age, we recognize you, you recognize us, that's happened. In next moment, Lennart Meri called to Hannibalsson to Iceland. Okay, my friend, are you ready? He said, Iceland is ready. Lennart Meri took the Latvian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Lithuanian Minister of Foreign Affairs together with the first flight to Reykjavik, signed a document. In the next morning, in a table of the whole world international society saying a recognition from Russia, from Iceland. And that's happened. With the precise, smart, and quick diplomacy, we break the ice. And this is very, very important. And if Catalonia wants to achieve the real independence one day, this is very, very good and very inspiring, this mass demonstration, the singing revolution, the national spirit, the spirit of the regular people. But from other hand, from other side, it's crucial and very, very important, the foreign policy. And there is more question about Catalan foreign policy then answers. They sometimes I really don't understand what's going on.
Thank you. Now, moving the focus of the debate towards the Catalan case, actually, in the light of the political context we were talking, in the last few years, there's a part of the independence movement in Catalonia who wants to negotiate a new referendum with the Spanish government because, according to them, that is what the international community is expecting from this Catalan nationalistic movement. Another part of this movement, though, thinks that an agreed referendum with the Spanish government will never happen for what we've been seeing these last 4 years, of political repression, many activists with many open processes, the state lawfare that started against activists and all the politicians who are exiled still in Europe. Now, this part of the movement thinks that the unilateral way will have to be taken once again, sooner or later. And precisely in this context, there's this general perception, that Catalonia, unlike the Baltics, so if we compare it with the Baltics, sure, it belongs to a democratic state member of the European Union, and that its territory has never been militarily occupied by a totalitarian regime. Now, where this puts the right of self-determination for the Catalan people, because sure, it cannot fit in exactly in a Baltic context, but it doesn't fit in a Scottish or British context, we can say, where its citizens are allowed to have a democratic referendum. So what's your opinion on that? Like how this right of self-determination for the Catalans can fit in which diplomatic or in which right of self-determination can fit? Now, please, each of you, Artur?
Maybe I'm a bit worried about what is going on in the world, and we have to watch more widely and to understand what is going on. I see a strong centralization and the strong kind of need for even bigger countries, and so the European Union wants to be a federal country, and to do like big changes, like green turn, for example. It's very hard to do having very many people around the table. It's more if you really want to do changes in a green turn way, although I don't like it, it seems so that it must come from up to down, and then the world changes. I mean, then we can do the green turn really. Therefore, I'm a bit worried about what is going on in the world, and Estonia also more and more gives away the decision making to Brussels, and sometimes it's good. in some cases it's good, but in sense of democracy, I don't see. I don't believe it's finally good. So it's very much depends where the world really moves. If the centralization of European Union goes on and federational movements goes on, then it's very hard to do to Catalonia any kind of steps. I mean, like but hopefully, I'm kind of pessimistic, but hopefully the world changes in a way that as the futurists say, there are two possible ways. The one way is very authoritarian, two very strong powers, and the other way is is that localization of economies and localization of the decision making, etc. It comes from the green turn. I mean, the global trading, as we see, is doing also making part of the climate change, and is a big reason why the climate is changing. All those transportations from different parts from the world. So in case. But this is just some futuristic thoughts. In case we're moving towards the federational thinking, then for Catalonia it's very hard to become independent at all. If we move towards the localism, then there's a big change to become independent as well. So we are dependent of the big steps of the world.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully the right of self-determination still preserves, yeah? Although we are part of a big federation called European Union, which is, in my opinion, compatible with the right of self-determination. That's how it should be in democracy.
I'm so disappointed because the self-determination, the term self-determination is kind of devaluated. When we spoke about self-determination early 90s, the meaning was different than Western countries use the same term nowadays. So if I'm speaking about self-determination, this is probably different than I don't know, some Western politician speaks about self-determination. So that's a sad part of it. And yeah.
Okay, thank you, Artur. Tomas, Otto, any thoughts about this topic?
For me, the meaning of self-determination is very, very easy and simple. One nation to decide what's going on with the territory where they're living. To live separate, to live independent, or to live together with some bigger brothers. Or other brothers, like in Switzerland. The German-speaking Swiss people living together with French-speaking, Italian-speaking, they're making referendums, they decided to live together. Everything okay, fine. In the Russian Imperial case, the Baltic nations decided, voting, that we want to live separate from Russian Imperial. The same happens with Norwegians and Sweden. Okay, the Norwegians saying, making a referendum, self-determination, we want to live separate. And nothing happens with the stability of Scandinavia. They live in friendly like a friends, neighboring countries, everything fine. The same Slovakia and Czechs, okay, they understood that better it's live to separate in own independent countries, everything fine. Do you remember the referendum in Scotland? When this referendum happens, the international society, diplomats, politics saying, oh, this is the triumph of democracy. The people have a chance to decide to live together or in other independent state. This is a real example of democratic society. And suddenly, when we're coming to the Catalan case, suddenly this is something bad. This suddenly everybody is very afraid that happens something bad. In Czech and Slovak case, nothing bad happens. In Sweden and Norwegian, opposite. They're living like a friendly neighboring countries. The stability are more than before. And right now, smelling for me, it's smelling for real something like, I would say, Nazis. Because if you're speaking about Finland, Norwegian, Czechs and Slovaks and Baltic states, the self-determination is okay. This is a democratic rights and values. When we're speaking about Catalans, suddenly that is something illegal. My question is, we are speaking about uber nations, super nations, and some under nations, some second level nations. What Catalans are something worse, or I would say 90% nations. Some, excuse me, this sounds for me weird. If equal rights for every nation, that's Catalans deserve the same like the other Europeans. This can't be that in Europe, in modern Europe, are some upper nations and under nations. This is completely not acceptable. And this is the question about principle. Because if one day somebody is saying that the Catalans are not enough good for the whole rights, and day after tomorrow somebody would say the same about Latvians, excuse me, sorry, about Estonians or Finns, etc., etc. We must follow what are we preaching. This is the this must be a fundament of European spirit, and this real European spirit, democratical spirit, and this spirit, the referendum, Catalan self-determination fit precisely.
Thank you. Thank you, Otto. Thomas, any last comments about this? And then we will move towards the questions and answer section.
Yes, I think that this EU as a federation idea was quite vivid, but because of coronavirus, because of this pandemic, different countries introduced different quarantine regime rules. And last year what happened, that without consulting Brussels, without asking for any permission, either Lithuania or even in Germany, Bavaria on its own, without asking permission from Berlin, introduced its border control for people who are coming from different regions or different countries. And at that moment, I thought to myself that nation state does exist, and this repatriation of the citizens, like Lithuanians sending to England military planes in order to evacuate its citizens so that they could be located in Lithuania. That was something so unpredictable within Schengen zone, when we celebrated free movement without visas, and suddenly the story back to borders. And this medicine superiority revealed that the nation state is still alive, and I think this is the opportunity for Catalonia to claim again that it's a separate region, and it could be much more than just a separate region. Another thing that talking about separatism, the true separatism is performed by Brexit. that is separatism. They separated from the European Union, whereas Catalonia wants to remain in the European Union, and Scotland wants to remain in the European Union. So I think what it comes down to is the diplomacy technique. I think Puigdemont made and his team made a big mistake by claiming independence, immediately suspending, without doing lobbying homework in Brussels or in Berlin and Paris, wherever it is possible, to get support from the big guys. They had to know what they will do once they claim independence. I think homework wasn't done properly, and another thing that Catalonians could do much more, perhaps, that to raise the question of human rights. How come Spain, as a European Union country, has political prisoners? Because Russia, that is not European Union country, with Navalny, that has political prisoners. But how come Spain has political prisoners? And I think that that should be pushed harder and harder and harder, attacked. And instead of just having a singing revolution, I think two things: lobbying, preparing for re-announcement of suspended independence, and to be more tough on the image of Madrid with political prisoners. Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. Actually, in the light of this foreign affairs topic, we have the first question from the audience. We're asking how important was this diplomatic effort from the Baltic politicians at the time to gain proper relationships, so then they could assure actual recognition for the independence. How much was this effort? How big was the effort, actually? Otto, I think you wanted to say?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Yeah, sorry. So there's this question asking how big was this diplomatic effort to gather international support from other countries back in 1991. So the independence recognition was successful from the international community.
How to say? The support. We have sympathies, but not real support. But we have in big countries we have huge good friends, a lot of good friends. Also our exile community, the Baltic people in United States, in France, in Germany, or in the UK, they actively lobbying, they speaking for decades for the support of the government support. I would say the homework was good done, and we have some friends, of course, not in the highest level, but actually when the moment came, we've been ready to use this small window of opportunity. Actually, this window was open for us for just a couple hours, but we've been ready, and before was done a huge work, not in the last years, but for decades. The Latvian, Estonian and Lithuanian exile working, by the way, together very actively and for many years. And we have a networking of good friends, I would say, everywhere. And yeah, that's why when our young diplomats traveling, to different countries to seeking the support from different kind of levels. We always had some local networking for supporting our diplomats. But the main point was that we knowing what we want, we knowing how to do, we knowing how to act, and we've been ready to act, and we're making, this is most important, we're making the connections with right persons. We are not flirting with some bad guys. We always know that our place is Europe. Our place is in a democratical society. And we always are speaking with a democratical part of the world. We are not speaking with some terrorist regimes. We are not flirting with the old guys, communists or KGB or mafia or etc. etc. We are not using the compromising connections, and that's why the reputation of Baltic diplomats looking quite good and the right timing.
Okay, thank you. Actually, there is another question regarding similar topic. They are asking if there was any strategy ready in case of violent outbreak in the Soviet Union that would actually put in danger this independence process and the actual stability of each of the republics. There was, anything prepared for that, for this kind of reaction from Moscow, actually, from that true invasion would happen, like a violent military invasion, besides what of course happened in the events of the January 91, both in Riga and Vilnius. Sure.
There is only one answer, 2 words, Beijing and Tiananmen. Do you remember what's happened in Tiananmen and Beijing? If the Imperial decide to stop democratical they send tanks, they're doing what China government did. I don't know about any plans if Moscow decided to use continue in the same way from the exile.
Okay, thank you. Now, well, maybe Tomas and Artur also, if you want to intervene. There's other question about what was the role of the academia and intellectual elites during the independence process. They supported it. They offered a specific kind of vision beyond the civil population. The intellectual elite. Yes.
It was very important, and also our first parliaments, they were full of intellectuals. Not too many anymore, but those days, writers, especially there was even a congress of creative people congress, where all the famous writers, the theater directors, actors, musicians, they gathered together, also scientists from universities. So the part of high-end intellectuals was extremely important, and also later, when we were already independent, we were very quickly supposed to put together principal law, and all the lawmaking process was really kind of creative stuff as well. We needed the top heads of our country, that's for sure. Sometimes the intellectuals who wasn't too brave but mostly they were frontiers, and they were visible, very visible. They are not as visible as those days. They are not anymore as visible, and that's the sad part of nowadays life. And probably we need some more wise people talking out.
Okay, thank you.
I can
yes, Thomas,
100% support that the role of intellectuals was very visible and very decisive in at the end of 1980s, Zionist independence movement, and early 1990s. Vytautas Landsbergis, the first head of independent Lithuania, not the first president, but the first head of official independent Lithuania, Vytautas Landsbergis. He's a professor in music. And then Romualdas Ozolas, here we have Otto Ozols, and Lithuanian Ozolas. He was a professional philosopher. Then his another friend of so-called national communists, as I already explained what it meant, was Bronius Genzelis. Genzelis, professional historian and a philosopher, who was also a professor of philosophy for me as well. These were people, philosophers, historians, even Landsbergis' case, a professor of music. They managed to find wisdom how to do negotiations and to prepare the road for independence, breaking away from the Soviet Union without having any training in it. This is something phenomenal for me.
Yeah, I agree with Artur and Thomas. Also in Latvia, there was many intellectuals in the parliament and in whole politics. I think this is very crucial and important, because in the critical moment, the nation or states need some creative solutions. You need something, you need the people who can think out of the box, who can step untraditionally, unpredictable, creative. And that's why the intellectual, they knowing how to do it, the artists or the writers. For example, my favorite, Lennart Meri, I know he's not an ideal, but he wasn't an ideal person, but he was a writer, he was an artist, he was a free thinker in diplomacy and politics. And that's give us some spirit. In that way, the role of intellectual were very significant, I would say crucial. And yeah, I'm just now start to think about this in that way. But yeah, that was important. And suddenly right now, I don't know about Estonia, but in Latvian parliament, there are too much political vulgaris, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Otto. We have time for only one more question. Actually, we have two left. I will try to combine them both. So the question is, what was the role, in your opinion, from media and journalists in general, both local and international, covering the events during the independence process? And also, as an extension, if you believe the new technology, especially internet, makes such a positive or negative impact to national emancipation process, could be, positive towards new emancipation process, that as a new technology that, the ones up until the early 19th didn't have access to this new technology. So both media at the time and this new technology possibilities, if you think they can actually helped this development of the national processes, emancipation processes.
We can't forget that the way of messaging was fax those days, and also there wasn't faxes in every office, and the connection lines between the countries were very hard to get. But Lennart Meri himself was a filmmaker, and he understood very well the role of media. And but still, although we spoke very openly already, like 1991, we really spoke openly already. But there was still some things between the lines, and then it's interesting. It's a good school. During the Soviet time, we learned how to read between the lines. So how get the meaning without saying it directly out. Without the journalist was writing something, but we read in between the lines that, oh, the meaning actually was something different from the what was written there. And that's actually a good school, and you understand nowadays also what is propaganda, what is not propaganda, what is fake news. You probably doesn't understand always what is fake news, what is not fake news, and that's the fake news stuff is probably very hard thing to fight against for Catalans, because there are many fake news about Catalan movements, and that's the sad part with the internet. Although internet gives you possibility, for example, to make quick and easy referendums, what we don't use, unfortunately. And of course, the role of media was very important. The connections with like Estonian connections to Sweden or Finland to get the materials out from the country were extremely important, and they already put up the special ways to do it, and yeah. But yeah, internet, we all know what is good with the internet and what is bad with the internet. So I can't see how it helps Catalans or how it's against Catalans.
Otto, yeah.
So Artur, right now we're using the internet.
Yeah, that's true.
Internet makes this conversation about these important questions.
Yeah,
But
I'm not against internet. Oh, come on.
Yeah, I understood. Yeah, but okay. Of course, we know all the bad sides of the internet about big brothers and etc., etc. But from other hand, that give a chance for Catalans to organizing very, very quickly different kind of actions, demonstrations, logistical things, because those million people demonstrations always need some very, very fast logistical work behind, and their internet helps a lot. I think from this point of view, for the Catalan people, is a little bit easier than that was in the Baltic States in 1990s.
Yeah, actually, during the referendum, I was there and observing the referendum, and what I did with my telephone, I did direct shows from different events what were happening there, and very many people in my Facebook account were following this and watching this. So this is something really you can do without official media, and that was important. So and I agree with Otto that it's much easier to show what is really happening and to be immediately to give immediate information to other countries and people as well. So, but unfortunately, some fake information are always moving around as well.
I would like to reply to the question, what was the role of journalists covering the events before independence? So I have to say that there are no journalists before independence, because it is illegal in the Soviet Union to talk openly about independence. It was, as Artur said, between the lines. We knew what we were going for, but before 1989, the idea of independence had to be really between the lines, and the journalists were officially approved and in agreement with KGB network. There's no freedom of speech, so there's no covering of the events before independence. Actually, it is inside the independence movement in 1988, 1989 that you can already start talking about your true history, like Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact in 1939, giving the Baltic States to the Soviet Union. But that is it. It's no journalistic coverage of events globally. Look what we want. We want independence. Such a thing did not exist. However, what we did illegally, we were smuggling information of what is happening and what we really want to achieve. Information written secretly on a typewriter, wrapped and pushed into a toothpaste and smuggled abroad, either via Polish Solidarność, through the Vatican, and then these texts were announced on, for example, European Free Radio or Washington, so-called Washington Voice of the famous Lithuanian voice of Mykolas Drunga. And then we would listen to the radio. That was our very important media, radio. Listen to what we will hear from Washington, Lithuanian independent radio, from Munich, European radio, to get that information which was prepared secretly inside Lithuania, away from KGB persecution. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Tomas, Artur, Otto. Actually, we have to leave it here because we need to finish with the event. But yeah, many thanks for being here with us today. And also thank you very much to all the listeners who are following us through the Amnesty International channel. I hope you enjoyed this event, and for sure we will meet in the future, hopefully with all of you. Thank you very much, Artur Talvik, Otto Ozols, Tomas Kavaliauskas. Thank you. And thank you all of you again for being here today. Thank you.